we'll be talking about beyond code and building scalable teams and technology. And you'll notice that I will not go too much into technical details, but I would rather focus on the underlying things that happen at the same time when the technology is scaling. So some of the agenda that we will cover today, I will make a brief introduction of what this will be. Then we can talk about the technology snapshot for scalability, then how to scale teams through people's growth. We'll talk a bit about the product and platform engineering and the pool that these two approaches create between them. And then, of course, the team size versus the efficiency from team sizes. Then we'll finish with a recap. And lastly, we will have a Q&A session where I will be happy to answer your questions, if any. So to dive into that, I'm telling a bit about myself. I am a software engineer, and I have been focusing also in business strategy perspective. And I have been a founder and co-founder of several startups, and most of them have failed. All of them actually have failed. And then currently, for the past years, I have been working as a fractional CTO for startups and small and medium enterprises, helping these companies with their technical initiatives, leading their technical teams, hiring engineers, and also designing architectures that help scale and help improve the technology while aligning with the business perspective. And so to make a brief intro on what we'll be covering today. As I told you, we're going to go beyond the code for scaling the teams and tech, and I will be covering 4 key factors to tackle scalability beyond code. And this will not be a focus on technical details for designing, your load balancers to direct the traffic to the right servers, but rather I will focus on the underlying aspects that sometimes they get neglected, or sometimes they happen because the technical aspect, takes all the focus and moves towards that. So to start with the first factor that you need to take into consideration, I will talk about the technology snapshot. And to start with this, I will ask you a question. And the question is, how do tech choices impact on the business success or failure? And of course, to some, this question might be very, very clear, like it does clearly impact on the business success. But some other people might argue that this doesn't make sense if you're not a technical company. But of course, we will see how they do impact. And to answer this, I will tell you a bit about migration horror story, something that happened to me a couple of years ago. And I was working as the CTO for this company called Coco. And this Coco is a fintech company that has 10,000 users, active users per month, and transacting $4 million per month from these 10,000 users. And when I got into the project, one of the things that I realized is that the data structure that they were having for these transactions, for the balances, and that everything that was being stored from their databases was a mess. Like, you can imagine the worst case scenario for designs. That was worse. Like, some transactions were in one table, inbound transactions were in another table. The type of transactions were not tied to any user ID, but rather like different IDs, different user identification. And the previous CTO made some design decisions that I truly do not understand why they made that decision. And the thing is that the users were starting to complain because they were not seeing the right balances. There were some transactions missing from their transaction history. So of course we needed to tackle this perspective, and it proposed a lot of risks because, of course, since it's a fintech, these are transactions with money, with people's money. And there was a lot of risks of not migrating the data correctly, and making people lose some of the transactions, don't see the right balances. So there was a lot of risk around that. Thankfully, with the whole team working with me, after 3 months, we finally made a migration to a better system, to a better architecture that was normalized and that was actually helping each user to see the right balances and to see the right perspective. But of course, this costed the company $50,000, and for a company that is moving $4 million, this might seem not that many, but it can make a dent in the business, and it can put at risk the business. So this is what it felt like before we had this architecture, which was a mess. And even if we had 10,000 users, when we were going to scale to 100,000 users or 1 million users, this would collapse, and customer support team would call us and telling us, hey, what happened? The architecture collapsed. But luckily, after the migration, this is how it looked like very organized, very well supported, letting this company and letting this product scale from 10,000 users to 100,000 users and then to 1 million users. And the way that I approach this project is I took a tech snapshot to identify the weak spots, and I focus on the ones that were the most weak. So that's where we decided to start working on. And how does that look like? Perhaps some of you have already seen something like this, but this is what I used to understand the perspective from the whole technology. And this works as a building, each of the layers supporting the upper layer. This is the tech snapshot. So the lower layer is the infrastructure layer, where you will find the hardware, the network, the servers, the cloud infrastructure, third-party APIs, and any other infrastructure elements that you have in your technology stack. On top of that layer and supported by the tech infrastructure, you have the data layer, the databases, your data warehouses, your data lakes, your CSV files, XLS files, XML file, whatever source of data that you have, it relies on this layer. On top of that layer, there's the software layer, where most of the people think that everything happens, and this is where you will find your web applications, your desktop applications, your APIs, your mobile apps, your smart tech tools for CRM, for ERP, for marketing. And on top of that, supported by all of these three layers, are the humans layer, which this is where you will find your end users, the staff, the team, the outside collaborators, and the consultants. And the way that I used this tool to tackle the project that I was talking to you before is that when I got into the project, I started to do this evaluation to understand what was the state of each of these layers that I was telling you. So I realized that the data and the infrastructure layer were in a very poor state, as opposed to the software and the human side, which were good. But of course, as I was telling you, this infrastructure, or this snapshot, relies on the data and the infrastructure being very robust, so it can support the software and the humans layer. So of course I realized this, and this is how I told the people in the management team, hey, listen guys, we need to start to tackle this issue. Aside from users complaining about this will not scale, because since we don't have a strong base layer, we will not be able to improve and make better software for achieving more humans and helping humans solve their problem. So that's how I use this snapshot to solve that and to tackle that project. And some of the insights that I got from that, and I can share them with you. And one of the first things is that I encourage you to avoid sacrificing best practices in the name of faster shipping. And I know that this might cause some people to, revolt, because, let's get things done and let's ship things faster. And if you take a lot of time to design architecture and nothing comes out of that, it will be a mess. Yes, of course. But then if you don't implement the best practices, then you can compromise the business success because of that, because the technical debt will be very large. You cannot tackle that cost, and it can actually impact your business and bring down your business. And that brings us to our second perspective, because when you are starting to make decisions and start sacrificing some of the things, you need to start to take balances of your technical debt to then in the future tackle that. You can avoid the cost to consume that business. And the thing is that technical debt sometimes, oh yeah, that will be solved in the future. Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But it is very important that you take into consideration and you start to review these balances. And lastly, if you are interested in some of the designs for these architectures, for like how Amazon serves 10 million users and how Netflix deliver their content, these are two great links that I have found around the internet, where you will find how to structure distributed databases, distributed servers in different locations, and you will have this presentation so you can access them. Cool. Now, let's talk about the scalability in teams and how to scale teams through people's growth. And this is one of the questions that I like to propose when talking about this. And how do we move forward with the business? How do we move the teams forward with the business? If the business is doing well, this seems easier. But if the business is not doing so well, then this might seem like a challenge. And again, I will tell you a bit about a story about that time that my team ended up hating me, and we'll go some years behind. One of Innovation Hacking Lab was a startup that I co-founded in 2016. And before that, I was doing software for anyone that wanted to develop software, mobile apps, websites, and whatever they were asking me. So when I started this company, I stopped doing software for other people, and I brought the team to come into the startup. Not everyone came, but as you can see in the picture, I'm already going mad on the right when this happened. And we raised capital from an angel investor. We started working towards this product that helped entrepreneurs design their business models and validate their ideas. And after 3 years of hard work, we didn't reach product market fit, so we had to close down. And of course, in the ending months, the team was very worried. They were knowing that there were no sales, even though we were working with them and telling them, yeah, we're working towards this issue. We understand that we're having this issue, but they were worries around them. And then these worries turned into a blame games, discussions, and anger between them. And then in the end, when my partner and I decided to close the company and tell everyone that we couldn't keep moving forward with that company, everyone blamed me for the decision, and everyone was hating me. So the lack of motivation, discouragement turned into a blame towards the leader of the teams, and this was a mess. Even though that I was, trying to be a leader for that team, a servant leader to helping them improve that. And that brings us to a quote from Alexander Osterwalder, which I like to quote. It's great leaders are servant leaders who create maximum autonomy while keeping everyone aligned. And yeah, this might seem like very abstract, but in the sense that what he wanted to express with this is that there's these two poles between micromanagement and a chaotic autonomy, where in micromanagement, you slow things down, and in chaotic autonomy, you let everyone do whatever they want, and that's also an issue. So the goal is to find a balance between these two, and that balance he calls the aligned enablement. This is easier said than done, of course, because you don't know when to stop managing, when to give more autonomy to a team, and the thing is that this proposes some challenges on itself. So it's not a science; it might be an art or a mix of things, and it takes time to actually implement that. But one way that I have found that it does help me to find that aligned enablement is to implement one of the frameworks from the Strategizer guys, and is this framework that provides a direction to your team. And this framework is basically answering these questions that you're seeing here. First, you need to answer the corporate identity question, which is who we are. Then we need to define the strategic direction to answer why do you want to do what you want to do. And then you need to answer the question from the organizational culture perspective, how your values guide you. And then on the right, you will answer the question about the brand image, what you say about what you do. And I know this might be very abstract, and I will dive into some examples next, but the goal is that when you answer these questions, you share this with your team, so your team can be aligned towards one North Star, toward one place where you can manage, but also provide autonomy to your team and find that balance between, aligned enablement. And to give some example on how does this look like, when Satya Nadella took over as the CEO of Microsoft, he took, I don't know if he used this framework, of course, but if we analyze it from this perspective, what they were doing is that their corporate identity was defined by a growth mindset. Their strategic direction was to become the productivity and platform company. And then their organizational culture was to become very collaborative and customer focused. And from their brand perspective, they were talking about, say, becoming the open innovation company. And again, as I was telling you, the goal is that you share this with your team. You can share this North Star with your team, and that enables your team to make decisions toward the right goals that you don't need to constantly micromanage what they're doing. So because they will just work towards this strategic enablement, aligned enablement, sorry. And this will give you a great insight of your whole team working towards that, especially when you're scaling and your team gets larger. That becomes more difficult to give direction. So one way to provide this direction is through using this perspective. You can use other perspectives, of course. You can use OKRs or whatever you like, but I like to use this one. And then I question myself, so would this have helped me avoid my team getting mad at me for blaming me or, making this decision? But I don't know. But I am sure that if I would have used something like this to align my team towards that, all the worries or the blames, everything that was working them would not be as present as they were, because back then we didn't have something like that. We didn't have an alignment. We were just communicating with our teams and focusing on transferring them, my partner and I, transferring them what we were seeing from our perspective. But sadly, that was not enough, and they were mad at me in the end. Luckily, yeah, we're all forgiven, and we drink some beers afterwards, so everything is fine. So some of the insights that I find that I want to share about these frameworks and about this scalability in teams through the people's growth is that you can leverage this aligned enablement between micromanagement and chaotic autonomy through this framework, the strategic guidance framework that I was just showing you. And again, you can use whatever whatever framework you like. I just like to use this one. And of course, as I told you, this is easier said than done. So you have to do other things. For example, you need to enable a culture of accountability and ownership so your team can make the decisions towards this strategic guidance, but also take ownership about these decisions and also take up accountability of these decisions. And that's also, I'm not saying that you need to blame people for their decisions and, punish people because they made a bad decision or whatever. But I am saying that you do need to enable this accountability and ownership. And then that brings us to the next step, the next insight, which you need to focus a safe space for feedback loops, which you will always bring an open space for giving and receiving feedback when these decisions are made towards this aligned enablement. And this is where you will find a culture where everyone feels safe, motivated, and you can foster the scalability of teams through individual growth in your company. And then lastly, one of the things that I have found that truly helps me out to scale teams and scale through people's growth is to help your team to see beyond the code, beyond the technological perspective, but also beyond the current sprint or beyond the current quarter, but also to see the bigger picture, the forest and the tree perspective. And one way that I have found to actually tackle this is through through that framework that I was showing you before. Great. Now let's move on to platform versus product engineering. And for those that don't know, platform engineering is the initiatives that you take to automate processes, improve the software lifecycle development, software lifecycle development process cycle. Anyways, the process for developing software. And then the product engineering is where you design the features, the things that will be used by the users if an email gets sent or if a button is green or blue. And the thing is that between these two poles or between these two approaches, it generates a pool between these two, proposing the question of what do you prioritize first? Should you prioritize first a feature or should you prioritize first a platform engineering perspective or these DevOps initiatives or this CI/CD process that helps your team ship codes faster? And again, I want to tell you a bit about recent experience that I had in this company between balancing the CPO and the CTO needs. I was the CTO, and the CPO, the Chief Product Officer, was of course pulling, and I was pulling towards my side. So this company is a travel company that connects travel creators, content creators with travelers, so you can travel with whatever the content creator has built. And of course, it was very clear that the product pool and the tech pool was trying to satisfy the business needs and the technical needs. On the product perspective, the CPO was telling me, yeah, we need to develop this feature. Yeah, we need to move forward through this place. Opposed that what I was listening to my team telling me, yeah, we need to upgrade that framework. We need to, there's a deprecated framework that we're using or a library that's been deprecated. We need to upgrade that because that's going to bring us problems. So that created a tension between the CPO and myself. And the thing is that this tension helped my team to move forward. And the thing is that when managed correctly, this tension can help your team move forward. But this is a double-edged sword because if not managed properly, tension might feel like this and between product and platform engineering. But every tension that you find in your business when there's a pull to one place or to the other, it can move you forward, or it can actually break and break chaos in your team. Motivation, it gets to the floor, and quiet quitting from people. So it is very difficult to actually manage that. But one way that I have found that you can resolve this tension, so you identify there's tension. So one way that you can resolve this tension is to make decisions and to move forward. And you need to agree to disagree and agree and disagree and commit, for example. But these decisions will release and resolve this tension and move the team forward. And of course, we go back into the initial question that I was asking you, how do you prioritize 1 million things and 1 million decisions when everything seems to be urgent? And this is the biggest challenge or the biggest question that you might be asking. And there's no one straight answer for this. But one way that I have found that it actually helped me to make better decisions is that we humans are very irrational. We take emotions into everything, even if we don't want to. When we are making decisions, we are basically putting our emotions into those decisions. So one way that I have found that you can remove emotions from the decision is to use numbers, because numbers have this magical power to remove emotions into your decisions, because numbers don't have emotions. 10 is less than 50 and 1000 is larger than 500. So there's no emotion there. So when next time that you are facing a difficult decision or any decision, just throw numbers at it and watch how the emotions are removed. And to exemplify this, because I know this might seem a bit abstract, imagine that we would need to choose between blue or green for whatever, but you can use as many variables that you like. You can have as many choices that you like, or even if it's a product feature that you need to develop or a platform feature that you need to develop. But imagine that we need to choose between blue or green. So one way that I like to think about this is that we need to throw some metrics into this. And again, the math doesn't need to be very exact. You just need to, it can be as complex and as simple as you like. The goal is that you just throw numbers at that. So let's think about these three metrics that we want to evaluate, like how the color provides confidence, how the color aligns with the brand, and how the color is liked by the team. And then once you have decided on these metrics, then you can align and assign some numbers from 1 to 10 for each of these metrics. And of course, you can do whatever you want. You can complex this math. You can put some of the metrics have more weight over the others, and you can calculate and do whatever calculations you like. But the goal is that you add numbers into this. And the magic is that whenever you add numbers, then you add every number from this, and then that gives you a very clear perspective on which is the winner, right? Then there's no emotions onto this. Like green, it is clearly the winner over blue, and yeah, there's no I feel in a way, or I feel the other way, because these decisions are based on evidence. So this opens a new space where I want to talk about enabling a decision-based process, and a decision process based on evidence rather than an opinion. And this is how you achieve something like this. You start to gather some evidence to support your decision, and then you make your decision based on the evidence, without the emotions, without the opinions. Some people might argue that when you make decisions based on evidence, that process is a lot larger and slower, I would say, as opposed to when you make decisions based on your opinions, that is faster. But then, of course, there's a larger risk to make decisions only based on the opinions. So some of the insights that I can tell you about this product and platform pool between them, and how you can use tension to move forward, is that first, identify the tension that you need to resolve between product and platform engineering, and any tension that you have find when there's two poles opposing them, and resolve that tension by making decisions. But then implement a decision-making process based on evidence instead of an opinion-based decision-making process, because that way, not only you remove emotions, but also when the outcome of the decision is expected or unexpected, then you can go back and see the evidence and understand a bit more on why that decision was made, as opposed that when you do it with an opinion-based, you start to get some blame games, and people gets blamed by the decisions, and that's no go. And lastly, just use numbers to remove emotions into your decisions. And, again, the math doesn't need to be exact or correct. Just, throw some numbers. And even if they seem very crazy, the goal is to not be exact with math, but the goal is to remove the emotions and make a decision based on that evidence. Great. Now, let's talk about the last topic that I want to cover today, and it's the efficiency in team sizes. And the question that I want to answer is, can smaller teams outperform larger ones in achieving innovation? And you might already have some answers for this, but I want to go back a bit, and I want to talk about this Ringelmann effect, or social loafing. And I actually learned about this recently, not long ago. I understood that this happened, but I didn't know that it was actually something that had a name, or someone had evaluated this. But back in 1913, this dude, Max Ringelmann, he evaluated what happened when a group of people was pulling on a rope versus when single people were pulling on a rope. And he discovered that whenever a group of people were pulling on the same rope, then the people would put less effort into pulling that same rope, as opposed that when just one people would be pulling on one rope. And then he discovered that this didn't happen only when pulling ropes and playing tug of war games, but this also happened when they were doing projects, when they were doing work together as teams. And the thing is that what this proposes is that as the team or as the group gets larger, then the productivity of the team becomes lower, because the individual productivity and the effort that each individual gets lower. And there's a strange thing that happens, because whenever we are working with a team and the larger the team grows, our personal responsibility, our individual responsibility goes down, and we put less effort into this, because the responsibility is shared. And of course, this doesn't mean that you need to do every project on your own and team can only be one sizes, but there is a sweet spot between the size of the team and the efficiency that this team can outperform and the production that this team can generate. And one way that I have found to mitigate this impact is to implement agile methodologies, because you can iterate several times and find that momentum towards where this happens. And yeah, I know that everyone is tired of listening to, yes, agile methodologies or whatever, but it is actually very helpful to work like that. And the thing is that when you are coming from this perspective, and when you are tackling a project or evaluating a team size, and when you're scaling, you come from an initial state and you want to achieve an ideal state through this iterative process where you start designing, then you implement, you make some experimentation, you test some things out, you gather some feedback, and then you learn so that you can adjust. And this is what I have been doing to mitigate that impact. I have been working with different teams on different sizes, and whenever we are in an initial state and we go to an ideal state, that is where we evaluate how the team sizes impact on the productivity, how the impact on this happens. And this doesn't happen only once, it happens several times. So because when you reach to an ideal state, that becomes the initial state. So you do that several times and several times. And that's when you find that momentum in which your team and your teams, especially when you're scaling, as teams become larger and when you can focus on these two places, this will give you the momentum and the insights that you need to make the informed decisions to reduce the team sizes or increase the team sizes depending on the outcomes and the productivity of each of the team members. And the team project, sorry. And of course, this is not an answer for everyone, and there's no like math that you can throw at this. You need to experiment, you need to test things out, you need to understand what is the output of your team, what is the output of a larger team and the smaller team. And you might listen to Jeff Bezos say that if you cannot feed a team with two large pizzas, then it's too large. But yeah, that doesn't fit to everyone, and you need to evaluate using these agile methodologies. So some of the insights that I can share you about the team sizes and efficiency, especially when you're scaling, is that to leverage on this ring and mal effect, to just understand what is the sweet spot between the size and efficiency, and focus on frequent evaluations of results to adjust through these agile methodologies. And to answer the question from the beginning, yes, I do believe that smaller teams can outperform larger ones. That doesn't mean that all the teams should be small, but and that larger teams cannot achieve innovation or cannot achieve the projects. But it does mean that whenever there's more people, this happens. The processes might be slower, and not all the time, of course, because it depends on many other factors. But a lot of the times, yes, smaller teams can outperform larger ones. What is a small team? What is a larger team? That is something that you need to discover doing some iterations and doing some tests. So this is some of the things that I wanted to share, and I wanted to show you a bit about the things that were underlying below and beyond that code, and not focusing on the technical aspects on the servers and how to design a cloud infrastructure that will serve millions of users, because you can find that whatever. But I wanted to talk to you about the things that were happening at the same time. And to make a recap on what we were talking before, is first is remember to even if it's difficult, implement best practices when designing this architecture to avoid these technical decisions impacting on the successful or the failure of the business. Then make sure that you foster a growth culture for your teams and align your teams through strategic direction so they can make decision and find that balance between micromanaging and chaotic autonomy. And lastly, next, identify this tension between any pools and make decisions to release that tension based on evidence. So then you can go back and understand that everything is moving forward. So take advantage of that tension to move forward. And lastly, use agile methodologies to improve your efficiency by evaluating all the time the size of the team and the results of the team. So you can bring larger teams or hire more teams. When they're asking, yeah, we need to increase our headcount. Yeah, this becomes a mess. And this is when scaling brings so many issues. So scaling introduces challenges that you cannot predict, those things that you don't know that you don't know. So the best thing that you can do is you can brace for the unexpected while managing what you can control using some of these frameworks or whatever frameworks that you have been using for helping you out. And I think that when you achieve scaling and when you work towards scaling, the more important things are to not only pay attention to the technology perspective, but also pay attention to these other underlying perspectives that are also working with the team. Cool. Now let's dive into some questions and answers, if any.